Hey there folks, Finley here. So, the power focus having to do with identity for theater talks about a guy named Moises Kaufman. So the question is, why do I want you to know about this guy? He is a playwright and a director, and he is the leader of a theater-making group called Tectonic Theater Project. So why is he important? Why does he address something that we should all know? Well, not only does he create theater, and some very important pieces of theater that you will probably hear about if you're in theater very long, he changed a lot about theater, and he's still living today. He's not like one of those people who changed the theater and then died a long time ago, like Stanislavski or Ibsen or Chekhov or that. He's still alive today, and he's still changing theater. So that's what we want to talk about. I'm not going to bore you with his biography because people get bored with that, other than to say he went to NYU like I did, so good. I will talk about other theater creators who go to Yale, boo, hiss. He went to NYU, which is the good school. Anyway, other point. So the thing that made him famous to begin with was a play called The Three Trials of Oscar Wilde, Gross Indecency, The Three Trials of Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde, as you may or may not know, very, very famous playwright, one of the most famous playwrights in history, really. Comedy of Manners, we talked about that in Drama 2, those of you who were there for that. He was put on trial. This is in the turn of the century Victorian era, put on trial for being gay in England because that was against the law. And he actually had 3 different trials dealing with that. So what Kaufman did was he took the transcripts of the trials as well as quotes from people from the same period, from newspapers, and from the writings of Wilde and from other people, and he took bits and pieces of all of these different texts, took maybe, I don't know, 1,000 pages of text, and took bits and pieces of all of those and combined them together into a play that tells the story of those, but every word that's said is something that someone actually said. He didn't write a single word of text. People are actually saying the things that they said in those times, and he put them together in a way that still had an interesting dramatic arc to it and compelling characters. This is called docudrama. Docudrama, literally from document drama, docudrama, is a little bit like documentary in that it's about something that's real. It uses real text, but the drama part is important. Because it's taking those texts that are not dramatic texts and fitting them into a form that works in the theater. And there had been examples of docudrama before Moises Kaufman, but he really is one of the champions of the form and has really taken it someplace incredibly different. So that was his first piece. Then the most famous piece he made was a piece of docudrama like that called the Laramie Project. Some of you may have read this in the design project you did in Drama 3, if you were in that class. Of course, many of you weren't. That is about the murder of Matthew Shepard, who was a gay man in Wyoming, and he was killed. And there's this whole question of homophobia and community. And so Moises Kaufman took members of the Tectonic Theater Company, which is the group that he leads, and to Laramie, and they spent months and months interviewing the people of Laramie. And then took those interviews, again, it's actual text, and form them into monologues that put together tell the story not only of the murder of Matthew Shepard and what that did nationally, but also how it affected the community. He points out, there's only 2,700 people 27,000, people in the town of Laramie, Wyoming. So everyone either knew the person who was killed, Matthew Shepard, or knew one of the 2 perpetrators, or knew someone who knew them. So he was really exploring community in that. Laramie Project went on to be one of the most produced plays in all of America. It's a great play. But again, it's important because it is a piece of docudrama. But here he begins not only to look at how can our documents inform theater, but how can theater be a reflection of community? What he really wanted to do was to put on stage that whole town of people. And so from that, we have all of these other pieces. Those of you who went to New York with us in 2017 saw a play called Come From Away, which is exactly this. That team went to the town that Come From Away is set, interviewed people, and took bits and pieces of those interviews to form the narrative. So if you've seen Come From Away, you've seen a piece that is directly descendant from the Laramie Project. And there's many other pieces like that. This idea that theater is not just a document, but can be part of and reflective of a community. The community is part of it. And so just like in Come From Away, you have one ensemble of actors, I think he did it with 10 actors, maybe it was 12, who portray this entire community of people. And so you have one actor playing many people. This all sort of ties back to Brecht, and theatricalism, those of you who remember that term. This idea that we're not trying to make the audience believe that this one actor is 12 people. We're sort of showing them that it's still the same actor, they're just changing their hat, and yet there's still magic that is made from that. That oftentimes, by not hiding the wires and the string behind the illusion, we actually make the illusion more magical in that way. Continuing that idea of community, he followed up the Laramie Project 10 years later with a piece called the Laramie Project Epilogue, which is another piece like that, where they went back to Laramie 10 years later, re-interviewed many people, and then put together a new piece. And the idea behind this was to say that theater is not dead. It's not you write a script and that's it. But rather that theater can be part of a conversation. You can make a piece of theater and that can affect people, and those people can make a new piece of theater, or perhaps you talk to people, as in this case, and you make a piece of theater and that affects them, and you come back later and you make a new piece. And so it's a cycle. It's not just, here's a play, just do it, that's just what the author wanted. But rather there's a back and a forth between the audience and the actors, and the actor and the writer, and there is a cycle going on there. And that's very different from the traditional model of the playwright says it, so I should do it. And who cares what the audience thinks? Who cares what the community thinks? So that Kaufman really playing with that idea of what is the role of theater in not only in the community, but in making community. He's also directed several pieces. He won a Tony for directing a play called I Am My Own Wife, which won the Pulitzer Prize. He also directed a play by a friend of mine named Rajiv Joseph. The play was called The Last Bengal Tiger at the Baghdad Zoo. And it won Tony for that. So he's a very famous director, as well as these changes. But something you might be sort of catching as you hear about these different pieces he's done is that many of them deal with sexuality. And that is one of the other things that he sort of deals with, is this idea of gender and sexuality is part of identity, and our identities together make a community, and so it's something that he feels should be addressed and shouldn't just be shunted off to the side or left for politicians to deal with, but that rather by discussing things as a community and then bringing that community into the theater, we can have that bigger conversation. Sorry, had to put the film together there, my phone rang. The point of all of this is not to say, oh, you have to believe one thing or you have to believe another thing, but that whatever you believe comes into the art that you create. That your art, whatever you create, whether that's sculpture or painting or writing or acting, and your identity are tied together. There is no such thing as a piece of work that is a genuine piece of art that is not in some way autobiographical. You can't separate who you are from what you create. Or if you do, what you're creating is going to be empty and hollow. It's the parts of yourself that you bring to what you create, your own unique perspective, your own intentions, your personal aesthetic, if you want to use those phrases, that really inform it. Kaufman has a famous quote. It's on the Wikipedia page, so we know it's famous, but he says, I am Venezuelan, I am Jewish, I am gay, I live in New York. I am the sum of all my cultures. I couldn't write anything that didn't incorporate all that I am. And that's why it's important to know about him, not only because he has added forms of theater like docudrama. Again, he didn't invent it. It had existed for years, but he really brought it to a new height. He has added this idea of the sort of Brechtian ensemble, bringing a community to life, and this conversation between the community and the theater that we see in other pieces as well. But also he's a great proponent and example of this idea that your identity is defined by the communities that you're connected to and the communities that you contribute to, and that that identity is inextricably woven with everything that you create. So that's Moises Kaufman. There's another very short, it's like a less than 2 minute clip of Moises talking himself that I'd like you to take a look at. It's in this same objective area. Yeah, thanks.